my opinion, if you're just relying on cardio for fat loss when, that's the tool. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like an hour a day on the treadmill. I'd rather like just jump in a volcano. Like
I'd rather like not eat. Like I'd rather starve. Fine. It's not worth it.
Ooh, no, it's not. It's not. Who was the girl you had on the other day? I saw that.
Oh, Bailey Bryan?
Yeah.
So she does the like social media for it's called Garage Gym Life Media. And basically like they're just a social media account that like kind of connects with a bunch of like people who train in like garage gyms and stuff. And they started like I tagged them like randomly in like one of my posts, and then they started like following along and they started reposting me and stuff.
Nice.
So I reached out to them and I was just like, hey, like I don't have too many like females, talk about like their training experience. Like, would you be interested? And she was like, absolutely, like blah, blah, blah. So it's just like great. So so like it was a completely like random thing. And then
that's awesome.
Yeah, man. Like that was exactly why I wanted to like start this whole thing in general, was to just kind of get out there and like talk to just different people. Here's this woman that I never would have met in a billion years from Texas that I, did like an hour-long podcast with just because I randomly like tagged their account in like one of my posts and they liked it, and they've been super supportive of everything, like, and they give you like a lot of good feedback and stuff. So I mean, it was nice for my ego boost. I'm gonna be honest.
There's so many people that, for me, I'll send you this video. I'm watching it now. I'm like 9 minutes. It's almost over, but I watched it like 3 times in 4 days. It's from 2 years ago when her name is, she's won the CrossFit Games now 4 times in a row. Her name is Tia. She's Tia Palumi or something. But it was when she was going against Catherine Dorsdottir, who had won twice. And when you look at like what they even have to do to win the CrossFit Games as a female, like you and me would be dead. Like they were saying, in the one video she had something for time, like it was a time snatch, walking lunge workout in Tennessee in the summer. And, like sounds terrible. Yeah. And then she went directly into a 5-mile bike ride, directly into a lake swim, directly out into an 8-mile bike ride for speed.
Jesus.
I'm like, these people, like, it's just insane I'm becoming more and more interested in, because like when I watched my favorite CrossFit documentary, it's called Froning, but the End of the Four, it's on Netflix. Have you watched that?
I haven't, but it keeps popping up on my feed. And it's like one of those things where like I'll stare at it on my feed and I'll be like, I should just hit play.
You won't even believe what he does. So he doesn't do it anymore because he's not like as competitive.
Sure.
But this was his last year as an individual. And one of the top announcers who's always announcing the games went to his house 3 days before the CrossFit Games. You would think like they might be taking it back.
Sure.
And they showed all of his workouts. He had 7 workouts in one day. He did not eat and he didn't even drink water. And the guy was like, this guy defies anything you read in a book.
Yeah,
because
sounds terrible.
You're like, how is this guy being able to keep up with his nutrient intake? Like, he was like, it wasn't even so much the food as it was like, he's actually not drinking any water.
Yeah.
Like, how is he not dying? Like, those guys are just freaks, dude. Total.
Yeah, and I do have to say, like, as much as I do rag on CrossFit, like, they're absolutely, like, they're in exceptional shape, and they do a bunch of shit that I will never be able to do in my life. Yeah. My biggest thing, and again, like I said, those are people who are at like the top of their profession, and they're absolutely killing it.
Yeah, different.
My issue with it is like the random CrossFit gym that like pops up, and then the housewife that wants to get in shape, and it's just like, I'm gonna do snatches for time. It's just like,
we just talked about this. We talked.
I know.
About this
I'm pretty sure we talked about this last time.
You take a mom, who's never been to the gym, and you're like, okay, I'm going to have you do overhead squats. One of the most stability-based exercises on the planet. And especially if they're doing snatch to overhead squats, which they usually do. So now you're looking at this like multiple complex movement pattern that like I can't even do properly.
No.
You know, but I've also never trained that movement. But I mean,
but that's the point could we, like, if we decided to put our mind to it and train to get there, yes. And could Sally, housewife, who wants to get in shape, could she get there in time? Yes. It's the fact that it's just like, all right. And look, I can't speak for all of them. I'm sure there are some who are very good coaches who coach up and, you know, have a progression and all that stuff. But generally, it's a bunch of, all right, we're going to hop in, we're going to do this, we're going to go, like, here's some time, go, you know, have fun.
And that's the thing I think why there's such a disconnect between, say, what we do and what they do. But I can see it from both perspectives. Like, CrossFit is based off 10 components. And I can't remember what they all are, but it's like strength, power, agility, coordination, precision.
It's like everything.
It's everything.
Yeah.
And so they need to randomize because, as you know, it's the games. When they show up to the games, they have no clue what they're going to do. So for a year, they have to be like
the plan for everything. Yeah.
I have to train everything. But for us, because we're more built on specificity of programming over blocks, they just like when you watch the Rich Froning documentary, he has this whiteboard with all these workouts written on it. He's like this. He's like, yeah, I guess I'm gonna do that today.
It's just
do that too.
I mean, is this like I have to plead ignorance here. Is this like where the like workout of the day kind of came from? Where it's just like here's like a smattering of stuff, and we'll just kind of throw it into a pot, and this is what we're doing today.
The workout of the day can be based on if I think I have it down because I've been watching so much of the CrossFit channel. Is you know, they have time workouts where it's like how many rounds can you do in 20 minutes? Mm-hmm. Then they have, you know, cardiovascular ones. They had this one called triple threes. It was insane. Okay. A 3-mile row on the rowing machine to something else for 3 miles. And then the end was a 3-mile run. And like, I was like, no way. But the craziest thing that the one I saw that blew my mind was it was 15 chin-ups. So the kipping pull-ups.
Okay.
15 air single squats, so one-legged goblet squats, to 20 handstand push-ups. And Matt Frazier was saying it's for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
He said most people are getting 20 rounds. So they're getting 300 pull-ups alone. Jesus. I'm like, yeah, like, so when you look at these guys and you're just like, you know, I understand how for me, I wouldn't program the kipping pull-up, but because I see why they do it, they're doing it for more time purposes. So they're not trying to just be like, you know what I mean? They're just trying to go crazy.
They're just doing it,
You know, but those guys you made a good point. There's a difference between the people in the games or people that make it to regionals and then every other person on the planet, you know, because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in CrossFit gyms.
And that's where most everyday people kind of get into trouble. And it's not just picking on CrossFit. It happens with like professional athletes and stuff too. You know, you get like, you know, I'll just say like NFL running backs who post these very elaborate exercises that they're training where they're like they're squatting on a Bosu ball when pressing something over their head at the same time and then catching a ball with their opposite hand and someone sees that, like some kid, like, you know, when we were in high school, it's like, hey, that's pretty cool, like let's try that. And it's just like no like that's the disconnect. Here's someone again who's at the top of his profession, and granted he can probably only do this exercise because he is a supremely talented athlete. He didn't do that to become a supremely talented athlete. And here you are, you know, Nick or Len, you know, 16, 17-year-old mediocre baseball player at best, trying to do this. Like that's how you fuck something up. Yeah.
The other thing that's funny too is, you know, it's weird because it's like everyone forgets, not everyone, but a lot of people forget that there's, you know, like very odd example, but like using a bench suit is a skill. Strength, as you and you know, is a skill. Yeah. So people will try and make up all these other things to do a skill when, when people are like, how do I get better at sprinting? You sprint.
Sprint.
How do you get better at deadlifting? You deadlift. You don't now, chains and bands and all that stuff can have their purpose, but helping with sticking points. But if you're not training the movement pattern,
you're not gonna do better.
You're just not gonna. You're never gonna get to the potential that you want to get.
Well, I've actually used this analogy, metaphor. I don't know. It's one of them. Whatever the correct terminology is. And I usually use it for.
Hold on. Are we live right now? Are you?
Yeah, we've just been going.
Good. Okay, give me 1 second because I hear my dog doing something.
Something he's not supposed to be doing. See, that's why I got cats, man.
I gotta bring the computer over for this one. Look at that. Are you kidding? I'm going to kill you. Look at this, dude. Just chewed up this.
Is that a starfish?
He's like, I didn't do anything. It wasn't me. Come here. Get in the cage. On the live video. Get in the cage. Jesus, man.
Shame on the internet.
Just shame. Yeah, exactly. I gotta clean this up. Give me 1 second.
See, man, this is why I went with cats.
Cats definitely are probably a lot easier to manage.
Actually, you know what though? You take the good with the bad, and I will be completely honest. Cats were not my choice. That was my fiance's choice. So naturally, we compromised and got cats. No, but cats, like, they're quiet. So where, like, your dog's, like, doing something he's not supposed to be, but you hear him because he's making noise and he's going nuts. Cats are fucking sneaky about it. So, like, they'll be silent and everything will be quiet and you'll think everything's good. And then I'll, like, come out and, like, my Christmas tree's, like, backwards and upside down. And be like, what the hell happened?
I have the pit bull who's 5.
Okay.
And then we have this 9-month-old or year-old, we have no idea, Rottweiler hound mix.
Okay.
And I'll be in here, like, studying something, and then the door will be shut, and I'll just hear, like, I'm like, well, that sounds like food, so what is it? And then I go out there, and this is completely the truth. And I love saying this on live video. My dog has ate at least 10 to 12 pairs of my wife's underwear. Like, she's like, I'm gonna kill him. She's like, I've lost $200 in underwear because of this dog. And like, he like specifically won't touch my stuff because we sleep in separate rooms. No, rooms are right next to each other.
Okay.
And I'll watch him. He'll like come up the stairs and look at her room and look at my room, and he's just like, creeps into her room, pulling her nice sheets, rip them to pieces. He's like the most destructive puppy I've ever had. So,
oh geez,
animals, man. But I wanted to ask you a question. So this is what I've been. So for my next video, the way I've been trying to go about it for my channel is, you know how it is. It's like you want to try, at least for myself, set some sort of a schedule so you stay consistent with posting, like. Not every day because I don't do YouTube for a living. Yeah. I did that for like a month where I tried to post every day. It was just too much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
The material was lacking because it wasn't in depth. So I'm doing my next video on, the next one's going to be on the simplicity of just like, because as you and me know, we were talking about this. My wife said, there's people on our channel that like are in our BNI group who don't even, like you and me throw around the terms, or most of us, frequency, volume, intensity, but they don't even know what those terms mean.
Yeah.
So like breaking it down in that, but the next video I'm going to do is going to be about the current research right now, which is really interesting to me, on actual brain function, neurological function with exercise. Like what exercise is actually the best for brain function, whether it is with the prefrontal cortex or the amygdala or any of that stuff.
Sure.
Because what the research really shows, it's almost always pointing towards cardiovascular activity, but vigorous, more high intensity than anything. The benefits that it causes in synapse connection between the junction, they see all these different types of firing patterns happening when people are like doing, say, 10, 40-yard sprints.
Okay.
So it's really interesting, but this is something else. And I've read this book a couple times. I don't fully see eye to eye on everything, like you. We know we never do.
Yeah.
It's called Spark.
Okay.
You ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
So it's written by a psychiatrist back in like 2008, so probably between 2004 and 2008.
Okay.
And at the time, he is really big on maybe not so much using medication for certain things,
Sure.
but using exercise. Like, what a thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in 2008, the American Psychiatric Association for Generalized Anxiety Disorder, their position statement had 13 different drugs between tricyclic antidepressants, between SSRIs, everything you can imagine, benzodiazepines.
Mm-hmm.
And then it said maybe cognitive behavioral therapy and nothing on exercise.
Okay.
But what the research is showing is when you look at the way, say, Prozac works or an SSRI, and then you look at like on a functional MRI
Mm-hmm.
when they're taking it, and then when you take people and have them do functional MRIs when they're sprinting or doing aerobic, they're getting the same type of actual physiologic changes.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
they don't know if it's permanent. They don't know if it's causing neuroplasticity. They don't know yet. But, you know, it must have been frustrating because he said he would go to conventions. This was only 10 years ago.
They don't know from the exercise or from the drug or both.
They don't know which exercise is the best. It's probably context dependent, like everything.
Okay.
You know. And they also don't know exactly if it's, like I said, if it's a permanent neuroplasticity, what the dose relation is. Basically, like everything, they don't know what the dose relation is. But I felt bad because, you know, he was like, I would go to these conventions
Mm-hmm.
and medical doctors would just like laugh at me when I would say, like, why don't we try exercise for like anxiety, depression?
Who invited this lunatic?
He was like, he's like, I'm not saying it's a cure,
Yeah.
but he's like, why are we not prescribing natural movement?
Yeah.
And they would be like, no, like that's not it, you know, when it was still believed that fear or panic was best served by doing nothing and avoiding the fear, which we know is just common sense. Like if you're afraid, you have to address it.
Yeah.
But every time I read that book, I've read it 3 times now, I always say to myself, like, man, that must be so frustrating when you're in the medical community and, you know, you have a lot of respect, you're a researcher, and you're trying to bring these ideas, and you just have people that are like, no, you're an idiot. Like exercise.
Especially when it's something that, like, I mean, to me, seems incredibly simple and borderline obvious. Like,
you know, and he said, you know, he had all these people over the years that, you know, some of them were like very holistic and they're like, look, I'm not putting any benzos in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, with these case studies over years and years, he would just have these people do something like, you know, maybe a vigorous jump rope, 15 minutes a morning, you know, like that's it.
Sure.
And the changes they were seeing in actual brain scans and then, you know, obviously subjective like mood or productivity or anything like that was unbelievable. And I kept, you know, it's so crazy because I read this article that came out in 2010 because I don't know if I told you, my wife and I, one of our focuses this year is corporate. I just set up a corporate package for a guy that we're friends with that owns a small insurance company, 7 employees.
Nice.
And when I was looking at the current research, which there's not a lot on wellness corporate packages, you know, what are the bottom lines? Like say you and me owned Johnson & Johnson was actually the perfect example.
Okay.
Johnson & Johnson between listen to this, man. Between 2006 and 2010, I think it was only 4 years, they saved $250 million between all their offices all over the world, just based off like having no smoke. So they made it a smoke-free campus.
Okay.
But they also like encouraged, they weren't like, oh, if you smoke, you're fired. They were like, let's get you help.
Yeah.
To help
let's help you quit. Yeah.
The centers, and then, you know, whether it came down to a medical doctor on staff, chiropractic, physical therapy, dentists, but they were very specific towards, you know, did so many surveys of like, what are our employees looking for? and stuff like that. And that's what's so cool about, like, you and me could for a month scheme or plan, whatever you want to call it, and then go to, like, if you and me went to Exxon right off there, and we were like, look, like, we get it. You guys sit all day long. What are you looking? Because some people might say to us, well, I care about nutrition, or some people say, I want to be able to move.
Yeah.
Because, like, you do this, you're in the practical application field. I mean, think about how many clients you've had in your life that can't do basic mobility, like anything.
Well, yeah, that's the first thing I would do with anyone. Is just like, all right, look, we're not gonna touch a damn weight probably for the first week or two. I was just like, I need to see you perform a squat and a hinge, and we're gonna start with that, and then we're gonna move from there. Like, and believe it or not, like, a lot of people can't even do that.
How do you go about it? What's your, like, say for, well, here's a good question for you too.
Okay.
What's your like average client? Like, what do you usually target?
I wouldn't really say that I had a target. Especially when I was working at a gym, it's kind of like a free-for-all, so you kind of take whatever. But that being said, like, I worked with like high school, middle school athletes all the way up to, like 90-plus-year-olds who, again, just kind of wanted to, like, come in and just basically move. Like, they're not coming in there to set any sort of, like, world record or anything, or to, like, deadlift or squat. Of
course,
They want to come in and they want to just learn. They just want to move better and feel better. So, and everything in between. So, I mean, so I can't really answer saying, like, who did I go after, because I went after everyone. But how I went about it, and again, you have to take each individual differently, because, every individual can perform. Like, I'm not going to, test out the middle school athlete the same as the 9-year-old. Obviously, that would be irresponsible. But I'm still looking for, like, similar kind of stuff. So, granted, whether you're in shape and you're a young athlete, like, I'm still going to make you do, like, a squat. Now, you can probably perform a version of a squat. If you've never been taught a squat, it's probably not very good, and it probably looks ugly as hell. But then that's my goal then with you, is to clean up the form before we start moving onto weight. If you're, a 50, 60, 70-year-old who maybe has never stepped foot in a gym before, and the only reason you've ever, like, squatted down was to, like, sit into a chair, you probably can't even perform a full squat. So then it starts with, all right, well, what can you do? Like, can you perform a squat on your own? Do you need to, hold on to the TRX bands or a pole for balance? Do you have, again, you start getting a little bit older clientele. There's more injuries that you have to be cognizant of and worry about. So then you kind of take it from there. And so, again, it's two different things, but I'm still working on their squat and making it better. Because for me, that was kind of the first thing that I thought people should be able to do.
Would you see a lot of pushback? Did you have a lot of clients that were, say, hard to reach, like, educationally?
No. I know what you're saying. And I would say no, because I was very diligent about explaining why I was doing everything with you. Like, I'm doing this because X, Y, Z. Not I'm doing this because I said so, or just not providing a reason at all. It's just like, look, and I would even say from the get-go, it's just like, look, the first couple sessions are going to be incredibly boring. But it's for me. I was just set the bar very low, and then, but in all seriousness, I'd be like, look, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be entertaining. And I would say right off the bat, before anyone even signed with me, I was just like, look, I am not an entertainer. I'm not a clown. Like, we're not going to be jumping around the gym. I'm not going to have something different for you to do every single time. Like, we're going to work on moving, and I'm going to help you get better at it. And that's essentially what exercise is. It's just getting better at certain movements. So that's how I started off, like, initial sessions. And then for some people, they're just like, nah, that's not what I'm looking for. And I'll be, okay, fine. Like, you can go find someone else. That's not me. But for the most part, because I was very upfront about, like, how I was going to go about their training and what I was looking for, and I was explaining why these first couple sessions are going to be mind-numbingly boring, people accepted it. And they're just like, okay, there's a process. So I think, especially when it comes to people who are novices in the gym, as long as they can understand that there's a process and there's a path forward, I think they're more accepting of it. And I think they understand, like, all right, I might not see what I want to see immediately. And we both know that's why most people quit, is because they don't get the results.
That's one of the number one things I try to explain to a patient, especially a patient.
And it's hard. It's hard to tell someone who's paying you a decent amount of money, like, you're not going to see what you want to see right away. Like, that's not the kind of culture we live in.
For us too, you know, this is something me and my wife talked about in a recent, and actually our business meeting yesterday. You know, in my field, you know, people are like, get me out of pain, and I want to be out of pain now. So when I bring this idea up to them and I say, you know, what if I told you that just because you're not experiencing pain doesn't mean you're healthy?
Yeah.
They're like, wait, what? No, pain. Like, I'm like, no, like, there's a lot of people that aren't healthy in so many aspects, and they're not in chronic pain by any means.
Yeah.
They might have some discomfort and joint stiffness like the average person that doesn't take care of themselves. But, you know, that's and I think for our attack in my field, it's, you know, trying to convince someone that has nothing to do with like, oh, you need to be adjusted 2 times a week or any of that, what some of these chiros say. It's like, the reality is a mixture of, as we know, exercise, whether it's stability, whether it's mobility, whether it's strength, power, in trying to hit multiple different aspects, balanced over a long period of time. Because as you and me know, people are like, you know, I want to be jacked and I want to be jacked now. It's like, well, it's not, you know, like
canned and juicy.
Patience is one of the hardest things in this society. We all want instant gratification so bad.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because you were talking about, by the way, that book you said you were reading, it was called Spark, or that you've read like 8 times. Okay, Spark. So it reminded me, I actually fairly recently finished a book called Brainwashed. And what it's about, it's kind of a play on the word, because it uses it as like a double meaning. One being that, like, we are very much as a society brainwashed into instant gratification, whether that be through social media, television, like the foods we eat. Like, we just want something tasty to pop into our mouth and satisfy us. And it dove into that instant gratification, and then the relationship that it then had between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So the amygdala obviously being like your fight or flight, that instant gratification, like ready to go, let's go. And the more we feed into, you know, just satisfying that instant gratification through constant scrolling and likes, or, you know, throwing another movie. Netflix now, you know, well, pretty much everything now, like the one episode finishes, you've got 5 seconds to change the channel or to stop it. It just goes right into it, because it just knows, all right, we're just going to put this on a loop and we're going to go. Or like Doritos, like, who has ever, like, have you ever heard anyone say they've overeaten broccoli? Like, no,
never,
because it's not like that instant gratification. It's not like that delicious, tasty.
It doesn't have that. And I think we talked about this last time. I read that woman who was a guest on 3 months ago in Mass Research Review. She was a neurobehavioral scientist. Okay. And the article is, you would love it. It's all she does for 20 years is study basically behavioral problems through neurology. And she broke down, you know, it was the satiety. There's 3 parts: satiety, hunger, and then consumption. Okay. And those 3 things. And she basically talks about how their research has proven that, like, these highly palatable foods with no satiety at all, it short circuits this whole entire system. Yeah. You know, now we're seeing people, this was the most interesting thing she said. She talked about how we've all heard terminology, insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. Well, she was talking about leptin resistance to the point where the brain, so you see someone that might weigh 400 pounds, sure, and they keep eating, and you're like, well, there's got to be something else going on. Maybe it's an addiction. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And they've realized that some of the chemicals in the satiety circuit are actually being short-circuited because of leptin resistance. Okay. So their brain doesn't even realize. They're register like we're full. They're like, done. I'm not full. I think I told you this. I worked at Red Robin for 3 months during the beginning of the business. People would come in, and I'm like, did that person just eat 3 appetizers, a whole entire pasta meal, and dessert? And they're just laughing away, and they can't fit in the booth. And I'm like, okay, like in my mind, like how we are, someone like that doesn't care about fitness or health would be like, why are you even thinking about that? But I'm like, what's going on here, like neurologically?
Yeah.
That this person.
This is an acceptable course of action.
Yeah, but for me, I don't know how you are. I love to eat. We're both Italian. My dad was full Italian.
Absolutely.
I love to eat. But it's like I get to a point where I say to myself, like, okay, I'm full and I don't feel good.
Yeah.
But people go past that every day, every meal, eating out all the time. So, and like you were saying, and Erica, my wife, has traveled. She's not, and my sister lived in Germany for 9 months.
Okay.
And they were telling me, like, it's not like it here. Like, you can't find fast food on every corner.
No.
It's not like that. You know, it's completely different. So, and that's why I try and tell people, like, I had someone ask me recently, we were talking about lifestyle habits. And I said, forget the benefits of eating, like cooking your own meal, because you actually know the macros.
Mm-hmm.
But the process of cooking a meal takes some restraint because you're not getting that, like, instant gratification.
Yeah, it's not brought to you. You actually have to put effort into it. Like there's a connection there.
People will be like, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, if you do that 4 times a day,
yes, it does.
You know? But yeah, no, it's, you know, there's so many like avenues that I like to think about when it comes down to, I don't know if you saw, I make a video every Wednesday for my mental health channel where I basically just talk about Dr. Albert Ellis. As I said, is the #1 considered psychotherapist now.
Yeah.
And he always talked about, you know, the importance of having, like we were saying last time, those difficult conversations that people are just like, oh, you know, oh, like say anything that, oh, you're this politics, I'm not talking to you. I cut you out. But in your mind, that might seem like the right way, but what's actually happening is you're not building any sort of grit. So when you get into a stressful situation, you
can't handle it.
You freak out. You have no way to manage a difficult conversation. So this is actually a great way to lead into this. You are not going to believe what happened to me yesterday.
Right.
This is, swear on my dad's grave, this is exactly what happened. There was a guy behind me on the road driving very, very, very erratically. Trying to like cut me off. I'm like, oh man, like I made a joke in my mind. I'm like, he's from Jersey. We get to the red light, and he didn't look stable. We locked eyes when he drove past me, and I was at the red light. Now, my older Nick Pannella self would have definitely gotten killed. So I left my car like this, and I hear, yo, what the F are you looking at? I was petting my dog. So I'm like, what's going on?
What?
And this guy is screaming at me, and I pull up next to him, and just like this. I'm like, hey, man, like, what's going on? Screaming at me, cursing at me. He wasn't all there. But I was thinking about in my mind, again, the way my mind works, I'm like, wow, like this is the importance of actually experiencing situations like this. Because I actually was so incredibly calm after about 10 seconds of him being not stable, he kind of calmed down. And I don't think he probably was expecting that. So that's why I like.
No, I was probably expecting some sort of escalation, and then
you know, and that's the way that we're so like. We look on Facebook. Oh my God. Master for idiots. Master for idiots. COVID vaccines are killed. Like all this crazy stuff, and I never see someone be like, "Hey guys, I know we see different on this, but we could still be friends." Like if I saw that, I would screenshot that and send that to CNN. And be like, please put this on the news.
So
you know?
It's funny and not completely off topic, but like slightly different. And it's just it plays into that whole like attention grab, escalation kind of thing. And I talked about this with someone else. It was probably Racco on one of my other podcasts or whatever. But anyway, it had to do like with like the polarization of the media and like why like it's such a divide, and it was the guy. He did the social media documentary. He was on Joe Rogan or whatever. That whole thing where he was kind of like the social dilemma, right?
Yeah.
So he went on Joe Rogan and did like an interview with him and he was talking about the media and like when he's just like think back to like when you started noticing more of like a divide between like right and left and Republican and Democrat and blah blah blah. And it was just like it started all around the time that like social media became popular because it's an attention grab. All these things need your attention, and it's because social media has the advantage because it's endless. It just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and it never ends forever. And every time every time you refresh on Instagram, something new's there. It's always something new. It doesn't matter from where, it's just something new. So in an effort to try and regain your attention, media or like news media, like national media, which we're supposed to rely on for news, became very attention grabby and like clickbaity. So now there's like all these inflammatory headlines that are meant to, grab your attention and stir up. And generally, people get pay more attention when they're outraged. So it stirs up your outrage.
200,000, like everyone, 200,000 people died from COVID. But then if you my wife follows a page called like the Good Movement, and it's like some kids helped a woman cross the street today, but like
it's not news. No one cares.
No one cares. Oh God.
Yeah, but it was so interesting, and that this is like the third or fourth time I've like talked to someone about this because it made such an impact on me. Like just like that kind of like light bulb moment where you're just like, oh yeah, like they're literally just trying to get your attention, and it is literally caused. And granted, I think it's overblown, like the divide. I think there's a lot of people who are fairly middle of the road who.
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like the divide between like one end and the other, and like it's crazy to me, like that it all basically comes down to social media, like, and that kind of leads me back to again that book I was telling you about, Brainwashed. The thing that I loved about it the most, it was actually by two MDs, a father and a son,
nice.
And it did not go away that. Generally, some people like assume when you think MD, like they were very not anti-medication, but like very like medications like a final resort kind of thing. And they were very like, we prescribe our patients like exercise and nature. Like that's the first two things that we tell people to make a part of their life.
Yes.
But yeah, dude, it really hit home, especially with that relationship, like I said, between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And they were actually saying there were studies, I don't know the exact studies, but I'm not quoting, but paraphrasing from the book, that when you stimulate these, like the people who like overly stimulate like the amygdala and like are constantly with that instant gratification, fight or flight or whatever, the amygdala grows. And then it takes a more prominent role in your decision making. So now because you have like propped it up and sustained it and fed it, now it takes an even more prominent role, which means now you're going to be even making like more of these decisions. Whereas if you go in the opposite direction, if you refrain and hold back from doing these instantly gratifying things and like eating the exact foods that you want and like the chips and the ice cream or blah, 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 whatever, it actually shows that the amygdala doesn't grow and the prefrontal cortex then takes a more prominent role in your decision making. So it was absolutely fascinating to me that like,
I'm happy you brought this up because this is what the book, that's what Spark is all about. It's basically talking about that same, and it really
I'm gonna have to read that.
It's quite interesting how that works because, as we now know through all neurology or neurophysiology, any of the research with neuro in the front, they now know the brain is plastic.
Yeah.
100% neuroplasticity is 100% real. So,
and I think they confirmed like it doesn't end, right? Like it's continuously plastic throughout your entire life.
That's what makes neurology so crazy.
Yeah.
They've never found anything yet where it's like, oh, that's the end of the power. And to give you a crazy example of when people say to me,
before you do that, I'm going to pause you 1 second. By the way, if anyone doesn't know what we mean when we say the brain is plastic.
Oh, good point.
It means that it can change, right? You can create new neurological pathways. It's not stagnant. We don't mean that your brain is actually made of plastic.
New synapses, and
yes.
There's a couple different theories that they believe. So one theory is that once you have a connection in your brain, a synapse connection, say for a fear memory, even if you get over that fear completely, that memory, that synapse is still there. It just no longer fires. It's not that it disappears. You just have created new synapses that override that. So that's one of the theories. One of the theories, the synapse dies, so it goes all over the place. But it's absolutely insanely interesting when people ask me this. They say, that's right, because I just remembered. How powerful is the brain? Okay. And I say, let me show you. I just showed my wife this video yesterday. There is a 7-minute video of a woman that they now call it DID, dissociative disorder, multiple split personalities. Mm-hmm. There are people on record who have multiple personalities, and one of those personalities will have type 2 diabetes and needs glucose, and the other one doesn't.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
That is, if you actually sit down and you're like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, it literally changes your physiology.
Like, how is that even possible? But this woman, she had 6 different personalities, a couple females, one was a guy, one was a child, and she was playing Monopoly. Okay. And her personalities were playing against each other. And they were, and I was like, I'll send it to you. And all I kept thinking about was, the brain is they're never going to be able to fully understand it.
No,
it's so complex. And and I always tell people, the reason why, because this is a theory they have. This has probably happened to you. It happens to most people. Some people will say, well, I don't understand. Sometimes I'll wake up and I might be like a little anxious or like I'm kind of like jolted awake. Well, as you and me both know, that evolutionary biological changes in the brain take thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. So what's evolved the most in research is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex wasn't big 1 million years ago in Homo sapiens because it didn't need to be big. But the areas of the primitive evolution for sympathetic responses, like when you're asleep 200,000 years ago, you're like, where are the lions at?
Yeah, you hear a twig snap, you're awake.
That doesn't go away. So they think that those instincts are still instilled. But what's cool about us now is humans have something that no other animal on the planet has that they know of. If a dog is hurt, the dog does not understand that it's hurt. We have a consciousness so we can think about our suffering. Okay. Like, dogs aren't depressed because they're not like,
okay, all right, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm a dog. Oh boy, oh, my life sucks. I'm a dog. They don't do that. But humans attach meanings because we have a consciousness that allows us to think about our problems. Like, in theory, we could have our arm cut off right now and be like, our arms cut off and just go about our day. But because we're humans and we have a prefrontal cortex, we're like, oh my God, I'm missing a hand. Oh no, I won't be able to work out. Oh no, I won't be able to go to work. A dog doesn't lose his leg and go like this. My life at the dog park is over.
It carries on. Yeah.
It carries on. So that's what's so unique about like the neurology of humans and why the prefrontal cortex is the most like interesting thing. And we have a friend who is like, high-end neurology education. Okay. And he's like, yeah, like these things are crazy. But he's like, if you ever look at, there's other areas of the brain that like, they don't even understand, like the basal ganglia. They don't even like understand what these things do because they're like doing all this research and they're just like, first of all, how do we even quantify this data? Because like you're a person, you have millions of experiences in your life. I have millions of experiences in my life. So there's so many different types of synapses and connections and everything like that. And this is why I always tell people, like, because I do want to do this. I was talking about it today. My wife always laughs at me. She's like, man, you get so excited. I do want to go back to school actually again, and probably in 10 years when the finances are like, it doesn't matter and it's more late. But I would like to get another doctorate, but I would probably do it either in neurology or psychology. Because like those areas, to me, trying to understand like stuff like how is split personality even a thing? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
You know? And now, like, you know how it is. It's funny because when you like to learn like we do, some people look at us and they're just like for me, I've had people like, don't you like get bored? I'm like, bro, like I can literally.
This is what I do when I'm bored.
This is what I do. I love this stuff, you know? I love learning new things. And to actually transition into the other topics that I've been studying besides, like, it all comes down to brain function and exercise. But the other side of the coin is the current research. This is going to blow your mind, this new statistic they found in the Journal of, I can't remember what the number, it's like the Journal of Aging. So obviously, as we know, performing exercise or learning how to play the piano starts off cognitive function. Right now, there's 5.4 million Americans that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. That's a lot, bro. Out of 5.4 million divided by 340 million, it's 1%. Like, it's a decent amount. But what they're seeing is when they take controls and they compare them to all these other elderly populations that may say walk or play bingo, socialize, there's a standard deviation that they're looking at. And for every one standard deviation towards like movement or exercise, the new data, I'll send you the study, shows it was a longitudinal study. So it was a good study.
Sure.
You have a 31% less chance every single standard deviation you make to having less chance of develop or keeping at bay dementia. Because I think the statistics are sad. It's like if you reach 90, I can't remember what it is. It's like you have a 65% chance of memory loss.
Yeah, it's like a coin flip.
It's like a natural thing.
Yeah.
But they're now seeing like there's a guy at my gym.
Well, I think it's like one of those things with like cancer too. Like at a certain like age, cancer is like a guarantee. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, think about this right now, you and me. This is such a morbid thing to say.
It's just Merry Christmas, everybody. Like it's just, you're all gonna die.
The chances between just you and me, us dying of either cardiovascular disease, which is now 1 in 3 and 1 in 4, dying of cancer, which is 1 in like 4, or having Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, it's like we're screwed. Like we have a 70% chance of dying a horrible death.
See, now if we were a dog, we wouldn't be able to think about that. We'd just be like,
Dog,
someone throw me a ball.
I love saying that like expression to people when I try to explain to them about humans, as Dr. Albert Ellis says, are the only creatures on Earth that can think about their thinking.
Yeah.
Dogs might think. They have a prefrontal cortex, but they're not, like I said, they don't stub their paw, and like I said, they're like, oh, man, I don't have a
damn it, not again.
Whole day getting up the stairs today. Like, they don't do that. But humans catastrophize. Humans are very good at that.
Yeah.
So we see the news. Going back to that, we see the news and we're like, oh man, I can't leave my house. Like, it's not even about taking caution, and they start panicking. They're like, oh well. Then they go down the rabbit hole of what if I get sick and what if that and what if this?
And they buy all of Walmart's toilet paper.
Oh, I heard it's crazy up where you are. That didn't happen here. Like it's not.
No? Yeah, dude.
No,
it was I remember the first time when there was like the rumor that like New Jersey was gonna shut down. Kristen and I like went to ShopRite just to like get some stuff. And there was before, like, I think our ShopRite opens up at like 7 or something. There was a line, like, all the way down the block at 6:30. I was just like, what the hell?
This is nothing. It's always fun to talk about random stuff.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with anything fitness. But they just opened up an In-N-Out by my house. Okay.
Seriously? I've never been, ever.
You will not believe this. This is true. It opened up 3 Sundays ago. People waited 10 hours.
There's nothing. There's nothing on earth that is that good to eat that it's worth waiting 10 hours for.
I always laugh. I'm like, what are they like? Do these people like? For me,
You just have nothing to do.
I stay busy, but like I am very aware of like, okay, don't work 90 hours a week and burn out with all the training and everything. I have to like, my wife and I have to look at each other sometimes. It'll be like 9 o'clock at night. Now it goes sometimes. Like 9 o'clock at night, and we're still like doing stuff work related. And we look at each other and we're like, if we say anything else about work again, just slap each other. I like don't even want to talk about work at all. Like, you know, for me, I'm like, I don't think I have 10 hours that I wouldn't allocate. Like to just be like, I'm going to sit in the In-N-Out parking lot for 10 hours and wait for a burger. Like that's amazing to me.
No, actually, it's funny that you say that because something similar in my town 6, 7 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, whatever. They opened up a Roy Rogers. Okay, again, never been to a Roy Rogers before in my life, so I can't make any judgment on their food. But same kind of thing. I don't know if anyone was waiting 10 hours, but like the highway was backed up because people were going to this place. I think it lasted like 3 years and it went out of business. I like, how good could it be?
That was like right before I moved here from Orlando, or from Florida.
Yeah.
The Hagrid ride opened up at Universal Studios.
Okay.
And in Orlando Sentinel, it was people wait 12 hours for 2 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's just people. That's what makes human psychology so interesting. Like what makes someone. This will tie everything together. What makes Matt Frazier, 5-time CrossFit game fittest man on earth, wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to work out for 9 hours today and push my body to the absolute limit. And then someone else goes, I'm going to sit on the ground at Universal for 10 hours today. That's what makes human psychology so interesting because they're just, and it's not good or bad. It just goes to show you that some people are different. Like some people are going to, it's never enough, and I do agree with this. And I think we talked about this last time. Rich Froning said this, and Jay Cutler in his bodybuilding documentary, to be truly number one in anything, you have to be a little crazy. Like,
yeah, it has to be an obsession.
It has to be an obsession. Like, you're not going to be Mr. Olympia. You're not going to be the fittest man on earth at CrossFit Games. You're not going to be the number one researcher on the planet in hypertrophy like Brad Schoenfield and just be like this balanced, normal person.
No, right? Yeah, something's a little off.
a little off. Like my buddy Chris Bearcat is doing a paper right now. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I am. He's doing a paper right now. Alan Aragon, I can't remember his name, Stevenson, and Brad Schoenfield. And he says to me, he's like, it's intimidating working with these guys because like these guys are top and like they're very, very, very specific about, that's their livelihood. But, I just, for me, like this is, when everyone asks me like, what's your favorite thing? It's stuff like this, like podcasts and Skypes.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, like I said, like the whole reason I started this thing was just to have these kind of conversations. Like we would probably not be doing this if it wasn't for this channel.
Zero.
Like, but now we do. This is the second time you've been here, and like each time's been a blast. And like I said,
so much fun.
This is such a great way for me because it's like you said, we like to learn, we like to educate ourselves. This is also a nice, refreshing way to do so without having to like stare at pages on a book or on a computer screen. You can have a conversation with another human being and go back and forth a little bit, and it's refreshing and it's nice. And I'm hoping if I'm getting something out of it, someone else somewhere out there is getting something out of it as well.
Well, I'm gonna ask you one more question. I think this is a good way to end it because funny story. I had COVID really bad, right?
Did you?
I literally was just on oxygen for 3 days.
You never know. You didn't tell me that.
Well, I died for 2 weeks and no one heard from me. So
The first thing you do is text me, I'm coming on your podcast. Here we go.
No, seriously, that's what I did. I had 104 fever, 104
Okay.
for a couple of days, bouncing off like 103 to 104.
Yeah.
I didn't eat for a week, literally couldn't stomach, never lost my sense of smell. My pulse ox was 70. I literally couldn't breathe. I had bilateral pneumonia, got a chest x-ray. I already knew it was going to be. Yeah. I was coughing up globs of mucus. And I was a little panicky just because subconsciously you hear all the news and you're like, oh, this isn't good because I can't breathe. And I'm really in shape and I do a lot of hiking in Colorado. So I'm like, why do I feel like I'm on the top of Everest sitting on my couch?
Yeah.
So, I never got tested, but my wife was positive tested. So I had COVID.
Yeah.
But I recovered fully, thankfully. But the question I wanted to ask, the reason ADHD. We're having our Thanksgiving dinner tonight.
Okay.
Because I was dying.
Yeah.
So I was cooking. But if you could have any single person on this podcast, they don't have to be alive. They could be passed on. Who would it be and why? That's a good question.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. That's not my answer.
What was it like 2,000 years ago?
How did you walk on water? God. All right. Give me. I'm not going to take too much time thinking, but give me like a second to think.
You can think about it. Go ahead. That's a good one.
It is a good one. So I don't. God damn it. I don't know. I don't know if there's like one specific answer because again, and this might be a cop out, and fine, I'll totally eat it. Because the whole point for me was to get to a point, and again, still in very much beginning stages, was to get to a point where I could talk to as many different people as possible. So like the goal was never to have one specific person. It was just to talk to as many different people in this field to get as many different points of view and get as much information in one central location as possible. I realize that's 100% a cop out. So if I had to give you a name, honestly, it might even just be like one of my professors from TCNJ. I had two that I really, really like admire their work. Nicholas Radamus, he's actually in the strength and conditioning. He's published in the strength and conditioning book. I absolutely, he was a giant bear of a man. Like, so he, not only was he like brilliant, but he could like back it up in the gym as well. And then I had another professor who I believe is actually still published in the strength and conditioning essentials. Avery Fagenbaum. He specializes in like children's training. And I think that is a field that really, really needs a lot of work because we have such just an issue with childhood obesity. And yeah, so I think those were, if I had to narrow it down to two, and again, these are kind of people that I know, but I haven't spoken with in a while, but like those are really two people I definitely like to talk to.
You want to laugh? You want to know what mine is? Mine has nothing to do with exercise.
With anything? Yeah.
This is real quick. So there's a guy in my business association, my BNI group, who owns an insurance company. Okay. And I treat him, and he's so funny. Today in our business meeting, he's like, because there's like 26 people in there. He's like, yeah, guys, like I follow all of Nick's stuff. I love him. He's so in depth. And I just realized that like, I don't even know if he's a chiropractor because he spends so much time talking about so many other things. Yeah. And I was dying. So if I could have one person on here, you are going to laugh when I tell you who, and I've changed my mind a few times, but I would like to see, because to you and me, it would be so hard for us to understand how difficult this would be for anyone at the level that they're at fame-wise. But because he was famous so young, I would like to have Justin Bieber on in a one-to-one.
Yeah, didn't you just make a post about him or whatever?
And I just want to ask him, what was it like to have that much fame? How did it mess with you? Because he went through some tough times.
Oh,
yeah. Still is.
It's very rare that any like childhood superstar like makes
Michael Jackson and Jackson 5.
Yeah.
He was one of them. The kid from what was the movie with Bruce Willis? I See Dead People. What was the movie with the little
kid? Sixth Sense. I don't know his name. Yeah.
Yeah. So, or like Macaulay Culkin, like
Lindsay Lohan.
You know, what's it like to be that, to have zero privacy? You know, it's like it's such a yin and yang. You're 18 years old, Justin Bieber. You already have a net worth of 200 million, but you can't be like this. Yo, Lenny, let's go to Starbucks and sit down and have a coffee.
Yeah.
It's like the psychology of just like sitting in your bed like this. I could have a house anywhere I want, but I can't go to Walmart.
Yeah.
It's such a crazy thing to think about, but that's just how my mind works. But listen, I got to run.
Yeah,
it was a blast.
Yeah, dude. Always fun. By the way, glad you recovered. Let me know when you're on death's door next time. I'll check in on you. You said before you go though, really quick. You said your wife got it too. What was her symptoms? Was she like similar to you? Much better? Nothing? She was just like, dude, isn't that like that's the craziest fucking thing about this thing though? Is like you're someone who has pretty much dedicated themselves to being like healthy and just your overall health and everyone else's health. And yeah, man, I'm gonna be so interested 5-10 years from now when they like are just like finally figure out like this is why it affected some people differently.
Yeah, like all the different variations if it like affects genetics. But yeah,
it's gotta be something.
Something. She lost her taste and smell for a few days, but she like never like she was basically, let's put it this way. If COVID wasn't real and she was the way she was, she would have still worked and been like, I have a cough.
Yeah.
I'm over here on the couch like this. All right, buddy. It was great talking to you, man.
You too, man. Anytime, as always. Thank you.
Always, buddy. Later, my man.
See you.